Imagine you're strolling through the bustling streets of ancient Rome. The year is 67 AD, and suddenly you spot something that stops you dead in your tracks. The most powerful man on earth, Emperor Nero, parades through the city, hand in hand with his radiant new wife, adorned in silk gowns and sparkling jewels. But something feels off. The whispers around you aren't just gossip. They're terrified murmurs hiding a chilling truth. That beautiful woman beside Nero isn't a woman at all. It's a teenage boy named Sporus, surgically transformed, forced to live as Nero's dead wife reborn, an innocent life shattered by one man's twisted obsession. This isn't just another story about Roman decadence. It's a haunting tale of how absolute power can turn love into madness, grief into cruelty, and a young life into a tragic living doll. What you're about to hear will stay with you long after this video ends. Nero's early promise. When Nero first took the throne, Rome rejoiced. At just 16, this young emperor promised an era of prosperity and joy, unlike any they'd known before. He slashed taxes, funded lavish public games, and dazzled citizens by performing in grand theatrical spectacles himself. The Roman people adored him, believing they'd entered a new golden age. But behind the scenes, something darker simmered beneath the surface. Even the purest intentions couldn't shield Nero from the corrosive effects of absolute power. Soon enough, the same emperor who once charmed crowds would descend into paranoia, violence, and madness, transforming from a beloved young ruler into one of history's most notorious monsters. And at the center of his unraveling was a dangerous love affair that would change Rome forever. The rise of obsession, Poppia Sabina. Everything changed the moment Nero laid eyes on Poppia Sabina, a breathtaking beauty whose brilliance matched her ambition. Unlike his quiet, reserved wife, Octavia, Poppia was magnetic, outspoken, and fiercely captivating. She wasn't content just being admired. She craved power, influence, and absolute control. What began as a scandalous affair quickly spiraled into something darker, a consuming obsession that terrified even Nero's closest advisors. Nero showered Poppia with luxuries, rare jewels from India, extravagant silks from China, perfumes from Arabia, all draining the imperial treasury to feed his fixation. But Nero's passion had a sinister side. He became dangerously possessive, stationing guards to watch her every move, isolating her from friends and family, and lashing out violently at anyone he deemed too close. His obsession wasn't just unhealthy, it was becoming deadly. And what happened next wouldn't just shatter Nero's sanity. It would set the stage for one of Rome's most horrifying chapters. A fatal argument. One evening in 65 AD, Nero returned home, tensions already high, his temper simmering beneath the surface. What began as an ordinary argument escalated rapidly, spiraling out of control when Poppia dared to challenge Nero, accusing him of caring more about fame and image than his family. She was pregnant, carrying what might have been Nero's heir, making her boldness even more dangerous. But Nero's fragile ego couldn't handle the challenge. Blinded by rage, the emperor lashed out violently, striking Poppia with such brutal force that she fell, gravely injured, to the marble floor. As reality set in, Nero watched helplessly as the woman he adored and the unborn child she carried slipped away before his eyes. Panic and desperation consumed him. He begged physicians to save her, offering wealth, making threats. But it was already too late. In one impulsive moment, Nero had destroyed the very thing he cherished most, and the grief that followed didn't just break him. It plunged Rome into a nightmare that would haunt the empire for years to come. Nero's disturbing obsession with Sporus. In the aftermath of Poppia's death, Nero's grief mutated into madness. He embalmed her body, worshipped her like a goddess, and demanded everyone pretend she was still alive. The entire palace tiptoed around the emperor's delusion, terrified of triggering his rage. But Nero's fragile illusion couldn't last forever. Reality crashed in the moment he laid eyes on Sporus, a young freedman barely 15 years old, whose delicate features bore a haunting resemblance to the late empress. In Nero's fractured mind, this wasn't coincidence. It was fate. Sporus became his twisted chance to rewrite history, to reclaim the love he'd lost. But there was one undeniable obstacle. Sporus was male. Yet for an emperor who considered himself divine, altering someone's identity seemed disturbingly simple. Nero made a chilling decision to permanently transform Sporus into a living reflection of Poppia. This wasn't just about appearances. It was about control, obsession, and a cruelty so profound it would echo throughout history as one of Rome's darkest moments. Brutal transformation. What Nero did next was as cruel as it was calculated. Determined to resurrect Poppia at any cost, he summoned Rome's most skilled physicians and ordered them to surgically alter Sporus, transforming the teenage boy into a grotesque reflection of his lost love. The procedure was brutal, dangerous, and irreversible, performed with crude instruments and minimal anesthetics. Sporus endured excruciating pain, helpless under the emperor's command, his screams ignored, his pleas silenced. After weeks of painful recovery, the transformation wasn't over. Sporus was forced into intense training, taught to speak, move, and behave exactly like a woman, every lesson erasing a piece of his true identity. Nero dressed him in gowns once worn by Poppia, adorned him with her jewelry, and insisted that everyone treat him as if he truly were the Empress reborn. Each day became psychological torture. Sporus forced to live as a ghost, imprisoned in someone else's life. But this horrific ordeal was only the beginning, because Nero's obsession was about to become shockingly public in a spectacle Rome would never forget. What followed was one of the most surreal and controversial ceremonies in Roman history. In the heart of the palace, Emperor Nero staged an extravagant wedding, complete with music, flowers, and golden decor. Everything one might expect from a grand imperial celebration. But this wasn't a typical union. The bride was a young servant named Sporus, now referred to as Sabina, a figure whose resemblance to Nero's late wife was unsettlingly close. Palace staff had spent months preparing him for the role, from attire to mannerisms, all designed to recreate the image of the empress Nero had lost. Under torchlight and the gaze of Rome's most powerful elites, vows were exchanged, ceremonial rites were performed, and the crowd politely applauded, masking a mixture of confusion, discomfort, and fear. Behind the smiles, few could ignore the deeper reality. This wasn't a celebration of love. It was a desperate performance of grief and control. For Sporus, it marked the beginning of a life lived under constant scrutiny and pressure, forced into a role he never chose, performing a fiction to preserve the emperor's fragile world. And the curtain was only just rising on what would become one of the most tragic performances in Roman history. Life as Nero's living doll. After the wedding, Sporus's existence became a surreal nightmare, trapped within the lavish confines of Nero's twisted fantasy. The emperor didn't just want appearances, he demanded absolute belief. Sporus had to flawlessly mimic Poppia's mannerisms, voice, even her memories, responding as though he genuinely shared a life with Nero he never lived. Every day was a tightrope walk. The slightest mistake could mean execution. Nero spoke to him as if he truly were his dead wife, reminiscing about moments they'd never shared, leaving Sporus to guess and improvise responses to memories he could never know. Outwardly, Sporus lived in opulent luxury. Fine clothes, exquisite jewels, his own servants and quarters, but inwardly he endured relentless psychological torture. Each mirror reflected a stranger. Every gesture was forced, every interaction a carefully choreographed act. Sporus slowly disappeared into a haunting fiction, existing only as a shadow of someone else. Yet even this cruel theater couldn't last forever. Rome was growing tired of Nero's madness, and soon Sporus would face a fate even darker than the one he'd endured so far. The tragic end. By 68, Nero's twisted reign had finally unraveled. Rebellions erupted, Rome descended into chaos, and Nero himself was declared an enemy of the state. As the emperor fled, Sporus, still trapped in his role as Poppia, was dragged along, a living relic of Nero's broken mind. But Nero's end wasn't Sporus's liberation. Instead, the young man became a political trophy, passed around by powerful Romans who saw him not as human, but as property. One after another, these new masters forced him to continue Nero's twisted charade, further stripping him of dignity, identity, and hope. The nightmare reached its darkest climax when Emperor Vitellius planned to humiliate Sporus publicly, turning him into an object of brutal amusement at Rome's Colosseum. Faced with this ultimate degradation, Sporus made the only decision left to him. Refusing to be robbed of his humanity any further, he took his own life, choosing death over one final humiliation. In death, Sporus reclaimed the identity stolen from him, his final act a tragic defiance, echoing through history as a powerful testament to the cruelty of absolute power. Conclusion. Sporus' story is more than just a dark chapter in Roman history. It's a chilling reminder of how absolute power can warp human nature, turning love into obsession, beauty into tragedy, and life itself into a twisted fantasy. His tragic journey, from innocent teenager to tortured living doll, forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about identity, cruelty, and humanity's capacity for suffering. Yet in his final act of defiance, Sporus reclaimed his stolen dignity, leaving behind a powerful legacy that still echoes today. As we reflect on this disturbing tale, ask yourself, how far can power corrupt, and at what cost? The answers might just haunt you long after this video ends.